Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
Today we're talking to Rock Felder, the co-founder of SquadCast.fm and the co-host of Between Two Mics podcast. He's on a mission to amplify collaboration by making the process of recording podcasts as seamless and as hassle-free as possible. SquadCast's innovative product is fast becoming the industry standard to record shows remotely in the best sound quality possible. Nice. Well, Rock, thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Pleasure.
So it's pretty cool. So I got a chance to interview Zach before having you on here on the podcast. And it's awesome to see the co-founder's story. So I'd love to hear your side of the story, starting up with SquadCast.
Absolutely. So Zach and I go back since high school. So I've known him for over 10 years now. I know his family real well. But after high school, we went our separate ways in college and careers, so to speak. So for me, I got a background in finance and accounting, got a job out of college at an accounting firm, which was really great for me to build up my skill sets when it comes to business. I got exposed to a lot of different leaders for the various businesses that we worked for. So I got really exposed to like executives, board members, founders very early on in my career. Also got a lot of responsibility for someone that early on in their career too. So it really like pushed me, so I'm really grateful for that. But after a few years, I want to say like 3 or 4 years into that career, I started to realize that, maybe this wasn't going to be the path that I wanted to dedicate my life to. It was a great job, well-paying job. I worked with wonderful people. But I think getting exposed to these executives and founders kind of made me think like, well, maybe this is something that I want to try. And I've always had this kind of what if I started a business. That always sounded interesting to me, not because I wanted to be my own boss, but more so I wanted to be a part of the ground level of building something, and whatever work that I did or decisions I made like really mattered and had an impact on the business that would hopefully have an impact on the world. So independently, I was starting to kind of go through, I don't want to call it a quarter life crisis, but just like what am I going to do? I spent all this time in college and spent these, greater part of my 20s working in this industry, but maybe this isn't what I want to do. And so it was a little scary and a little discouraging. I hesitate to use the word depressing, but it started to flirt with depression. And then just started to realize that, why can't I be similar to the clients that we were working for? For me, it just seemed like they weren't any different from any of us, other than that they just did it. They had an idea or had a passion for something, and they tried it out, and it just was really inspiring to me. And so I started reading a bunch of books, listening to a bunch of podcasts, watching a bunch of YouTube videos that all kind of centered around entrepreneurship and just really dedicating myself to finding a way to prepare myself for making that jump. So I started preparing myself mentally, financially. And so that was about, I want to say, the spring or winter of 2016. And by the fall of 2016, Zach called me one day, and it was kind of out of the blue, even though, we talked periodically, but it wasn't, it was still kind of somewhat of a random call. And I was driving, I was on a long commute home from work, and he pitched me the idea that became SquadCast. And for me, it was really easy to get excited about. One, because I'd already been going on this personal journey of looking for an opportunity to kind of put myself in and be at that ground level, like I mentioned. But the fact that it was rooted in podcasting really spoke to me and was really excited, easy to get excited about, just because I was a huge fan of podcasting as a listener. I never understood why it wasn't more popular at the time, because even in 2016, it's still like there was still many of my coworkers who worked on other tech companies, worked on other tech clients. They didn't know what a podcast was. They didn't know it was an app on their phone, and there was all this information that was going to speak directly to them that they had access to. So that was always mind blowing to me. But at the same time, there was this belief that that was only temporary, that it was going to be more mainstream, more popular. And I think that's where, other than friendship and trust, I think that's where mine and Zach's founder relationship is really rooted in, is that we just are huge fans of podcasting and really believe in the medium. So again, it was really easy to get excited about. And that was in October of 2016. And we just started going at it from there, not really knowing what we're doing, but just trying to figure it out along the way. And it's been great. 4 years later to be where we are now, and actually to have podcasting where it's at now. It's really exciting, especially this 2019 and 2020 have been huge years for the industry. And it's really starting to get to a more mainstream position. I don't have to explain what a podcast is to my family. A lot of them are listening to podcasts now. A lot of them know about all the exciting stuff going on with whether it's Spotify or Google, everybody's kind of paying attention more. So it's been exciting.
I want to dive into the trends in just a second, but I do want to take it back to kind of the intelligent way that you went about to diving into entrepreneurship, because you mentioned 3 specific things: the mental work. So you worked on yourself first. And one of the things that I've seen for successful entrepreneurs is that the confidence that they carry when they take or execute an idea is pivotal to the success of that idea. So working on the mental thing first, and I think that can get overlooked quite easily. Then on top of that, the education route is huge, but even further, you've focused on being financially ready for what's to come. And I remember around the same time, I was in a program to start a software company. Clearly, we didn't start a software company, but it led me through the journey of doing media and the whole gamut. But it was around 2015, 2016 where I joined the online program, and I was in there, young kid, whatever, but in there with people who had families, parents, whatever. They were doing the same hustle. And like I had people from Microsoft, I had people from all over the world. And the one common pitfall that I saw is that they took the leap too soon, underprepared, and then 6 months later, guess what they were doing? Back in their gig, back in their full-time job. So I think that being very strategic with your risks, and I think the way that you think is it's almost like stacking risks on your favor. And I want to dive into that as well. But I think making sure that you're prepared for the road to come can be easily overlooked. And different people have different journeys. Some people get the funding up front. Some people have the different investors or have different savings funds already. But I think the way that you approached it, the 3-prong approach, is essential to have something that lasts a long time, because startups aren't just a one-hit wonder. It's a ultra marathon at this case.
Yeah, that's so true. And I really appreciate you saying that. I wish I could sit here and tell you that it was intentional to have that 3-prong approach, but quite honestly, it's just what felt natural to me. I think, I think it's because I feel like it's all related, but I felt like I was most likely going to take a step back. And I'm saying that with air quotes, because I had a nice cushy salary with benefits and all that stuff, and a path to maybe the top of the pyramid. I felt strongly like I could make it all the way. And at an accounting firm, it's partner. And that's a great position. There's a lot of exciting things partners get to do, but it just didn't feel like it was the right fit for me, or at least something I was ready to put all of myself into, like I would with something like SquadCast. So for me, it was more so just mentally preparing myself to make that leap, to go without a salary for an extended period of time, or at least a significantly less salary. And so, as you mentioned, we did not take funding out the gate. We bootstrapped the company. We've been bootstrapping it pretty much ever since. And it really just started off as a hypothesis to see how long we could take it this way and really prove out our different guesses or bets rather. But we've really loved the independence that this model has brought us. So but it didn't come out with it. It didn't come without some tough times, which is the first 2 years of the business. Essentially, Zach and I were working on our full-time jobs and then fitting in SquadCast on nights and weekends. Mm-hmm. And then when it started getting to a point where, okay, we have real revenue and real customers that are depending on us, like even though the business wasn't necessarily at a point where it could start to pay us, we still needed to it was assigned to us that we need to pour ourselves into this thing full time. Yeah. So it was a very de-risked approach is what Zach and I call it, that we tried to de-risk everything along the way. Again, that wasn't necessarily intentional, but it just felt right. I think me coming from an accounting background, I am risk averse and somewhat conservative financially by nature. But there's still that entrepreneur risk taker dog in me that wants that's okay with, taking a bet on hope and faith that we'll just figure it out. But to me, it just felt right that I knew I was going to be making a big jump and a change, and I had to prepare myself because it's weird when you leave a company to do something entrepreneurial and everyone's looking at you like you're crazy or you're taking a step back. And in my head and heart, I'm like, well, I might be crazy, but I have to try. Not trying was worse than failure.
I resonate so much with your story because I remember when I took the leave, like that's the 6 months after, that's when I really learned how to manage stress. But before we dive into that, or before we go deeper into that, you mentioned the risk factor is more like an intuition, a feeling. So that means that the way that you approach risk is very unique. So I want to ask you, now that you're on this side of the hill and you're looking at things differently, you still have that mindset. You still want to make sure that we're doing things strategically, proactively, with an end goal in mind. But how do you personally view risk?
Yeah, that's a great question. Risk it's not something I necessarily like. I'm not just like this. I don't want to gamble. Like we don't want to gamble. But it does take a bit of a leap of faith, a little bit of feeling. I will say though, that we're getting much more, structured and formalized with how we make decisions and using data to help us make decisions now. It still comes down to a gut feeling, I think, at the end of the day, but it's using data to help inform those feelings and gut decisions. But in the early days, it was heavily feeling based and just really trying to prove everything out along the way. Because again, podcasting was a very different industry than it is today. So starting off was much more uncertain because at the time it was kind of debated whether podcasting was going to be a big industry like we're seeing with radio. I mean, radio in comparison is still a much more, there's much more revenue generated. If you're looking at ad dollars for say, there's much more money in radio still than podcasting. They're saying podcasting will get to over $1 billion in ad revenue, I believe in 2021. So, I mean, $1 billion, that's exciting. It's a lot of money, but there's multi-billions in radio. Yeah. And so we still got a lot of ways to go, but the trajectory is extremely exciting. So I think it was more based on feelings in the early days and just trying to, not take on risk blindly, just make educated bets. But now that we have data, now that we're getting more structured, now that we actually have more of an organization to manage and more people depending on us, including our customers, we need to be a lot more structured and formalized and can't just wing it as much as we were doing in the early days. And
it's actually fair.
It is fair. And it's actually more fun this way. I mean, it's slower, but having decisions that are informed by data, it just makes me feel better because it's not just like we're pulling it out of the air.
No, that's true. And I think that's essential when you're growing a company or even when you're starting off. Obviously, you don't have the data in the beginning, but educated, informed decisions, looking at all the options. And I mean, all the options. But then once you start looking at the data, I think for founders listening, it's important to be able to understand what is the data that is essential for me to measure? What are the essential KPIs that we need either to operate or to grow or to measure customer feedback? And then from there, making iterative decisions. Now, you have to marry that data to the marketplace trends. So you mentioned, earlier that back in 2012, 13, 14, 15, I remember podcasting was almost like underground. I mean, for me personally, like if for me, I know this might not be the same for listeners, but it was typically an older demographic listening to podcasts. Either that or you were getting into like technology or stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now on the flip, now there's like storytelling podcasts, sci-fi podcasts, fiction, all these cool stuff. Now, what are the trends that you're seeing moving forward with podcasting, and why do listeners should look into podcasting as a medium, as an outlet?
Yeah. So one of the interesting things, or trends rather, that we're seeing with podcasting, and we attend a lot of podcasting events like Podcast Movement or Podfest. So we get exposed to a lot of this information. But Tom Webster, who works at Edison Research, and they do the Infinite Dial report, and he always has a pretty interesting keynote at Podcast Movement. And I believe it was last year's, because it was in person, so it was 2019. It was about how the reasons that people are coming to podcasts are changing. So in the early days, like you were talking about 2015 and before that, you were much like me, where you came to podcasting for usually education, or you wanted to go deeper on a particular topic or find something that was maybe more niche, but that spoke directly to whatever you're interested in. And so that's why I went there. And that's why a lot more people were listening to podcasts at the time. But also, like you mentioned, with the rise of more entertainment style podcasts, like audio fiction and just more narrative form, Serial was a big show that really broke into that space. More people now that are coming to podcasting are coming for entertainment. They're coming for a sense of relief. They want to kind of get away. It's much like TV, where you just kind of, I want to chill. I want to turn off, so to speak. Like, it's not necessarily to be, more education based or improve skills and stuff like that. It's more about just entertainment. So I find that fascinating, but I think it's a good sign that it is becoming a more mainstream type of medium, that people are coming to it for all sorts of reasons, including entertainment. And the reason
for infotainment too, right? Like, if you have education, making it engaging, fun, and at least leaving the audience with some sort of delight.
That's probably the best example of it, because you're learning, but you're still entertained. And that's what some of the branded podcasts do, which are basically it's like a show that a company will pay a podcast production company, or maybe they do it internally, where it's a show and it is kind of a marketing vehicle, but when it's done right, you're getting a lot of value in entertainment that you almost forget that they're selling you something at the end of the day. There's eBay has a good one. I believe it's called Open for Business, where they tell all these stories about different users on eBay and how they used eBay to grow their brand or sell products or whatever. And I thought it was a great show. But by the end of it, I was like, maybe I should sell on eBay too. And it's like, they got me. That was the whole point.
Yeah. That's interesting. So the trends we're seeing are people's intentions. So it looks like we're crossing the chasm. More mainstream audiences to look to get entertained as a different outlet, from the smart TVs to your phones to being able to have access to a cool show in your ears. Now, how do we marry that? So I know you have a lot of different industries that you're working with, but in particular for our business and entrepreneurial audience, how do you marry those trends and what listeners are doing right now to current business needs as we move into a new era like 2021, et cetera?
Right. Yeah. So I think podcasting is a great way to build influence or build a connection with your audience in a truly unique way. And we see this in the data. So another presentation that I saw at a podcasting event was how engaged an audience is with, and it's the same piece of content, but with a video versus like a Facebook Live versus a podcast. And the numbers are crazy, where, you're lucky to get someone to pay attention to your Facebook Live if it's past 10 seconds. I believe it's a little bit longer for a YouTube video, but not much longer. But for a podcast, you can expect that the audience in general to listen about 75% of the way through. So they're, I don't want to say captive, because that's kind of a negative word, but they are maybe captivated. It seems to be, there's a much more sticky relationship that develops with podcasting. And that's why you hear the term intimacy get thrown around, but it really is a great way to build a connection. And our guess or bet is that it's going to be as prevalent in the digital world as having a social media account. It's like kind of, it's kind of basic that, everybody has a Twitter, Instagram, and maybe a few others, or like you mentioned, a website. Like we think podcasting is on that same path and trajectory. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to have a podcast, but it should be a consideration if you are a small business owner, anyone that's looking to build influence and really establish yourself in a space. It's a great way to connect directly with people and build a connection. And that's why I think ad dollars are really starting to flow into the space, because they're seeing that like a host like Joe Rogan is built up this relationship with his audience, that when he, does an ad for a product and he does it really well. So maybe Joe's not the best example, but in general, the podcaster has built up a relationship with their audience that they really trust them. And so the advertisers are seeing that advertising on a podcast, even though it's pretty hard to track it now. And thankfully there's great companies doing work in the ad tech space. People are seeing that it has a really good return on investment. So to me, that just shows that connection is a powerful thing.
I even want to add on to that. There are hidden benefits, not just in ad dollars, because I think the number one issue with ad tech or even measuring revenue is attribution, especially when we're working with organic humans in an organic marketplace. And like, you never know what impression or what sound or what call to action made that buying decision, or if they saved it in their memory, then 3 months later decided to make a purchase. Yeah. So one of the, I think, hidden benefits as well, and I want to see if you have data behind it with your team and your podcasts, with having increased relationships with referral partners, business partners, or potential prospects. And I know that's something that can't easily be measured to attribute it to being on a podcast.
It's definitely tough, but from what I don't have any data, but just talking to podcasters every day, like we do, it has been a good way to build their brand, build their influence and their company as well. And I just use ad dollars as an example of why to validate that the connection that's being built on podcasting. But you're absolutely right. It goes way beyond ad dollars in so many ways. And I can think of, just unique relationships that have been built up with the podcaster and their audience that doesn't necessarily include ad dollars. So you're right. There's tons of hidden benefits. And that's why it's just such an exciting space to be in.
No, that's awesome. So with everything that's moving right now with podcasting, the trends where customers are at, what are some of the things that you're developing over at SquadCast to be able to address those current trends right now, but also be in the forefront as we move into, 2021, 22, so on?
Yeah. So as of today, SquadCast is a platform that you use to record your podcast remotely. And the goal for us is that it sounds like it was recorded in the same room to your audience. We don't want that, what we call like a Skypey sound, where you can tell that it was recorded online. And quite frankly, can be disruptive and disturbing, especially for when it's in your ear. Our ears are very sensitive. So we believe that there needs to be an industry standard for when it comes to recording your podcast online. And we think SquadCast will be that industry standard. But we've always incorporated a video element to SquadCast because it really helps with the conversation. We felt to see each other and build rapport. And then our guess was that hopefully that would be picked up by your audience when listening to the conversation. It just felt natural to see each other. But as you can imagine, our customers are like, well, hey, I appreciate the great sounding audio quality that SquadCast helps me with, but I could really use the video quality too. Because again, we were big fans of podcasting as listeners, but we weren't creators quite yet. We are now, thankfully, but we weren't when we first started. So we didn't necessarily think that the podcaster would care for the video. But now we're learning that podcasters, even if podcasting is the entree of what they offer, they're doing a lot of other things in addition to that. They're doing some email marketing, they're doing social media, and sometimes YouTube and live streaming. So having that video content can really be beneficial for them in all sorts of ways. So that is our most requested feature, and something that we're very close to having available soon, which is, in addition to recording audio on SquadCast, you'll also be getting high quality video. And again, we are building it to be the industry standard when recording content remotely.
And I remember talking to Zach about this. It's you guys care almost to a meticulous point quality. So I know that's why it's been it's still like in the under wraps and development, but the high level of quality to do that and making sure that we can deliver that to customers is essential. But Rock, I think for our listeners out there, what's the best place for people to go to reach out to you? Thank you for this episode and learn a little bit more about SquadCast.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. And if anyone wants to learn more about SquadCast, or if you're thinking of starting a podcast for the first time, or you're got a long-standing podcast and looking to up your quality, please head over to squadcast.fm. Everyone that signs up gets a free 7-day trial, but there's a lot of resources on the website that include just podcasting best practices, especially when it comes to recording remotely. We really want to establish ourselves as thought leaders when it comes to doing that, because it's not easy, even though we're all forced to do it now.
Oh yeah, definitely not easy, but excellent. We'll put that link in the show notes. Rock, thanks so much for being on, man.
Thank you, Raul.